So we're good? Okay. Okay, good morning, everyone. Welcome to the session. I'm Lori. I'm your Zoom tech / Zoom chair / room chair. So this is very exciting. Woohoo! I'm trying to keep track of everything. So welcome to everyone on Zoom. We have some participants connecting in by distance, which is great. And because I wasn't actually supposed to chair, I didn't really prepare introductions for anyone, but our first speaker this morning is Anton Marks, and perhaps you should just introduce yourself and then feel free to start.
Great, thank you.
So we have till 11 o'clock and there's one other session. So we probably half an hour and then we could switch and then have some discussion. Sophie and Merlin are here. Yay, wonderful, welcome. So you'll be speaking second. So about half an hour and then half an hour and we'll have discussion, or would you like to just do a little more time and finish your session and then? Okay, well, let's do half an hour and see how it goes because we're a little bit late getting started. So, okay, great. Go right ahead. You have your. So people on Zoom
I'll
can
get
hear.
to that. I'll get to that at the end. I'll get to that at the end. It's a question, it's a good question.
Go.
Okay, so the final thing that I want to talk about is I want to talk about the different educational frameworks.
do you have slides? Oops, okay. How about we have a burning question for Anton while the other presenters, the next presenters get their slides ready to go. And then when you're ready, I'll introduce you. So does anyone have any burning question for Anton?
First of all, I think it was really, really interesting. I mean, coming from Israel and didn't know anything about it and has to come over all over. And I think what I was really impressed is like, I think that you are the new pioneers by, having effect on the society wherever you are. And I think this is great. Still, you have missed me these questions about what's the difference in group, but you can tell me later. It's, if you want to explain more about what's the differences in the group. But I think really, it's really great.
The groups within the kibbutz?
Yeah, what's the difference between the floors, you said?
Basically, what happened was that the first group graduated from had grown up together in the youth movement and had come out of the army together and decided that they wanted to continue living together as a group and to affect Israeli society as a group. And they did that, and they were continuing to work with the younger group that were also the year below them, that were also coming up through the youth movement. And the year later, when they finished the youth movement, and the army, they invited them to come and live next to them. And that was the second group. And that process happened over 8 years. So each group, essentially, I mean, it's changed and there's been a lot of movement and a lot of changes in the makeup, but basically each living group is a group that has been together for years and years and years. Each group does things slightly differently from each other, both how much they meet, how much they, how they deal with their finances, but basically the group is a unit within the kibbutz. There are some things that we do as a group. There are some things we do as a kibbutz, very few things we do as a kibbutz. Mostly the things that we do are either in the groups or in mixed groups. There are lots of community learning that goes on in mixed groups, people from different living groups. So it's, I guess the easiest way to explain it is an intimate group. It's a group of the people that I know the best, that I have an ongoing relationship with, an ongoing conversation with. 75 people might not sound a lot, but it's a lot to know what's going on in the lives of 75 people. But when you're talking about an intimate group of 10 people, it's possible. And that level of trust and openness and understanding can happen in that small group. And if other people are in those similar space processes with their living group, the idea is that as a kibbutz, everyone is in some level of conversation.
Great, thank you very much, Anton. I think we'll move to the next conversation and we might be able to have some discussion at the end of the session, which is over at 11. Is he set up for his mic there? So it's number 4.
Is it on?
Okay, so our next speakers now are Sophie, I probably will say your name wrong, so Sophie.
Sophie Rydelius.
Thank you very much. So she lives with her husband and daughter at Kibbutz Samar. They're both kibbutz members and work in the organic date plantation. She has a Bachelor of Social Anthropology and has worked most of her life in healthcare, event promotion, and farming. And Merlin, your last name is?
Becskey.
Thank you.
It's
Is an upcoming PhD student in anthropology, working toward finding out how the egalitarian kibbutz movement can be upscaled and applied in other contexts. And besides being a Berliner, he works as a lecturer in civic education. So thank you very much. And we'll just get set up here in a moment and they can start their presentation.
Hello, hello. You can hear me? Good morning. Boker Tov.
Good
Glad
morning.
to be here.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for the presentation. I'm Merlin Becskey, as already said. I hold a master's degree in cultural anthropology from Uppsala University in Sweden, and I am currently looking for scholarships for my PhD. So I'm at the beginning of my PhD, wanting to conduct further research into a kibbutz in southern Israel, Kibbutz Samar. I'm going to give you a short presentation, maybe about 10 minutes, and then I will interview my friend and interlocutor, Sophie, as part of my empirical research, and also to give you a much more, how do you say? Yeah, thorough view or perspective of this kibbutz from a kibbutznik, or a fresh kibbutznik. Well. And yeah, that's more or less it. Let's see, I shared my screen. Okay, this is my book. My master's thesis has been released. I called it 40 Years in the Desert. And I will just shortly give you an impression of what I've done and what I intend to do. Okay, so just to understand from where I'm coming, my inspiration and motivation to do this kind of research would be narrowed down to this one quote that I very much like from late anthropologist David Graeber. Anthropology served as constant reminder that most of what we assume to be immutable has been, in other times and places, arranged quite differently, and therefore that human possibilities are in almost every way greater than we ordinarily imagine. And as I research human, social, and cultural phenomena, the phenomena I have been looking into in my first research was, or my ethnography about Samar, anarchism. So the working definition here is autonomous agency and decentralization of power through the absence of written rules and permanent elected leaders within the endemic organization of Kibbutz Samar, or found in Kibbutz Samar. Okay, so the kibbutzim of the early 20th century came closer to realizing the ideals of anarchism than any other communal experiment before or since. Inspired by Peter Kropotkin, Gustav Landauer, and other anarchist thinkers, these communities successfully put into practice concepts that radicals elsewhere in the world had for the most part ever been able to talk about in the abstract, or which had at best only been tried out on a small scale with no real longevity. Direct democracy, communal ownership of property, and the absence of a wage system, political and managerial hierarchies, and top-down authority were all pillars of the early kibbutz way of life. And it was on this foundation that the kibbutzim existed for decades as a working model of participatory economy and polity on a scale never achieved anywhere else. The mountain of studies produced on various aspects of the kibbutz life across the disciplinary spectrum attests to the value of many academics. Many academics have seen in these communities as sites of scholarly research. Anarchists have historically also taken an interest, with some viewing the kibbutzim as a test case of ideas and practices that could be drawn upon and put to use elsewhere. But over the last decades, this interest has waned. Indeed, today, to suggest the kibbutz as a subject for research can be a risky move. Genuflection at the altar of anti-Zionism is now less a prerequisite for acceptance in certain sections of the academic world than the activist one. And at the intersection of those two worlds, a near fanatical fixation on the geopolitical context in which the kibbutzim operated makes a study of the internal life of a kibbutz a tough sell. This newfound disdain is only emboldened by the kibbutz movement's widely documented shift away from its original communalist ethos during the last decades of the 20th century. In fact, cracks had already begun to appear in the kibbutzim's self-image as a radical socialist flagship by the 1950s, and by the late 1970s, it had become clear to many, both within and outside Martin Buber's assessment of the kibbutzim as an experiment that did not fail, was on the brink of becoming indefensible. But while privatization may have argued the end of the allure of the kibbutz once held for leftists, it was by no means the end of the kibbutz story. Many kibbutzniks, disillusioned with the tyranny of the socialist bureaucracy that took root in the kibbutzim during the early post-independence period, simply left the movement to build new lives in the outside world. But others remained adamant that there was still value in the original kibbutz concept. The result was the emergence of a new generation of communities seeking to revive the ideals of the kibbutzot of the early 20th century and to put those ideals into practice once again. Even within the new wave of communes, Kibbutz Samar has always been an outlier. Established in the 70s, Samar has become known in Israel as the anarchist kibbutz, a contemporary iteration of the freewheeling communal anarchism of the kibbutz from the 1920s and 30s, and one which has somehow remained resistant to the broader trends engulfing the mainstream kibbutzim. The kibbutz movement has evolved by adjusting its collective philosophy from one that followed a global socialist trend to the beginning of the 1900s to one that caved to institutional pressure to allow national Zionism in the 1930s and 60s, to partial privatization in the 1970s and 80s, and to a partial dissolvement of the collective, or what is called a renewed kibbutz afterwards. Kibbutz Samar, on the other hand, challenged this trend by presenting an alternative collective entity that is ruled by three principles. First, utmost individual freedom within a collective economy. Second, individual needs have a priority over communal needs. And third, no written down formalized rules. These three principles were not adopted by the traditional kibbutzim and seem to be counterintuitive as guiding rules for a collective community. Yet I argue that these three principles are the core conditions for Samar's viability and long-term sustainability. Maintaining the informal philosophy that, I quote, "We are not equal. We have all different needs and abilities. Therefore, striving for technical equality of budgets, house size, etc., is at best futile. All members have equal opportunities to fulfill their needs as they see fit." End of quote. In 1997, and in a 1997 essay responding to reports of the demise of the kibbutz movement in the British anarchist press, one of Samar's members, Meir Turnansky, pointed to Samar as proof that true anarchy can exist and benefit the people who practice it. After staying there for 2 weeks, writes Israeli author Eliyahu Regev, "I dared to define Samar as an experiment that didn't fail to maintain the communal society without authority." The mythology that surrounds Samar should make this community an obvious avenue of inquiry for anyone seeking real world of examples of anarchist and egalitarian communities. And yet until now, the gap I have tried to fill with writing an academic ethnography has emerged on the basis of my master's thesis. In this gap that my ethnography, 40 years in the desert, my ethnography takes its place. Through participant observation, interviews, and theoretical analysis, my fieldwork in Samar provides a thorough, in-depth study of this unique community, developing a holistic understanding of the kibbutz as seen through the eyes of its own members, while at the same time delphily exploring theoretical questions of personal freedom, participatory democracy, non-hierarchical management, and other issues much debated by academics and anarchists alike elsewhere in the world, but which at Samar are simply features of everyday life. With this ethnography at hand, I attempt to show us how delving back into the most radical traditions of the kibbutz can illuminate the possibilities of mutual aid, cooperation, and the self-management as a basis for viable and sustainable alternatives to the status quo. There will be some for whom the self-inflicted myopia engendered by servitude to currently fashionable leftist dogma will make it impossible to see anything worth in Samar, of any worth in Samar. To others, however, the experience of this community can provide valuable insights into questions at the core of current debates about alternatives to dominant organizational models. What kind of values would such alternatives promote? How would these values be operationalized? How would economic, social, and political life be organized? What would decision-making arrangements look like? What role for managers, leaders, and hierarchies? All of these are questions that the young men and women who built the kibbutzim or the kibbutz movement in the early 20th century sought to address. And there are questions which half a century later, the founders of Samar sought to revisit once again. I believe we would do well to pay careful attention to their answers. Towards the end of the 20th century, in response to the kibbutz movements shifting further from its original ideological goals, new projects began to emerge throughout the country. As children of the traditional kibbutz began to set up new communities as a reaction to what they saw as the failure of the traditional ones, a new epoch of the dialectic of the kibbutz development began. One of the most audacious of these projects, in many ways, was the flagship of a new generation of anarchist oriental communal experimentation is Kibbutz Samar. Here found in the south, close to Eilat. I don't know if it's so, you can see it. A small settlement of 110 permanent members situated about 30 kilometers inland from Eilat. Samar was founded in 1976 by kibbutz children who were trying to remedy what they felt were the shortcomings of the kibbutz their parents had created. I quote, "Basically, we felt that our parents had got it wrong," end of quote, explains one of the community's founders. "We were all from kibbutzim about 40 years old, and we were acutely aware of the alienation between the kibbutz member and the kibbutz establishment. We knew all about the tyranny of the work rooster and the humiliating dependence on committees. We forged our principles in revolt against the established kibbutz, and we have held on to them ever since." Most kibbutz children of that generation saw exactly the same erosion of personal freedom and dignity on their parents' kibbutzim, as Samar's founders did. But the majority naturally believed that this authoritarian and humiliating kind of communalism was given. Many simply left the kibbutzim as a result, adapting the attitude, if this is communalism, then we don't want it anymore. The youngsters who found Samar, on the other hand, were adamant that another kind of communal life was possible, one that could reconcile individual freedom with communal responsibility, and set out to prove as much. Samar's members have never called themselves anarchists. They did not set out basing their way of life on anarchism, as many members are not even familiar with anarchist ideologies. And the settlement they created has never explicitly called itself an anarchist kibbutz. Yet that is precisely what it has become known as. Understanding from the experience of their parents' kibbutzim that authority is the root cause of humiliation and degradation on the human being, the founders set out purely and simply to eliminate every element of mainstream kibbutz society that involved the domination of one person by another. As a result, Samar came to function according to the principles of pure communal anarchy without any kind of hierarchical or authoritarian structures or any of the organizational functions that have undermined communal life in the original kibbutzim. The community's founders made it a priority to ensure that there would be none of the institutions, committees, formalized regulations, binding decisions, or personal budgets that they felt subverted individual liberty on their parents' kibbutzim. In place of authority, there would remain only personal relationships between individual equal human beings. And the settlement would be regulated solely by the sense of personal responsibility of each member towards their fellows. Samar, in other words, functions more or less as the early kibbutzot did. Its modest size and intimate nature allow it to employ a system based on total trust, face-to-face democracy, and mutual responsibility. Direct democracy and active participation by members in the decision-making process is the norm. There, the informal general meetings by which the kibbutz regulates its affairs are a far cry from the complex network of bureaucracy and committees that have come to characterize communal life on the original kibbutzim. Perhaps more important than the general meetings, which themselves are sporadic to say the least, is the constant informal dialogue that is central to Samar's life. A willingness to talk and discuss everything openly means that a culture of constant organic conversation is a fundamental part of the kibbutz existence. Samar's income is derived mainly from agriculture. An organic date plantation, which makes up 60 to 70% of the overall incomes, besides a dairy and a plant nursery, which provide the economic base. But Samar is a fluid and dynamic society, not averse to economic diversification. According to one of its inhabitants, the kibbutz develops according to the wishes and the needs of the members, and as such, it is distinct from the complex web of committees that have recently become a bugbear on the traditional kibbutz. At Samar, if someone wants to do something, he or she assembles an ad hoc committee and does it. This approach has allowed continuous experimentation with a range of new cooperative enterprises with varying degrees of success. Whereas in many of the older kibbutzim, the autonomy of the individual has come under threat from increasing bureaucratization and the institutionalization of regulations, at Samar it is manifested in every sphere of the kibbutz life, while the allocation of labor, for example, in the larger established kibbutzim, is the responsibility of a nominated committee. In Samar, there is no work rooster. It is up to the individual to decide when, if, in what branch, and for how long they work. While collective consumption on the traditional kibbutzim has for many years taken the form of a collectively dictated budget for each member, Samar's members have revived the system used on the very earliest kvutzot, a communal purse from which members are free to take as much as they think they need. I quote, "At first there was a fixed monthly allowance," one member recalled, "but we opted for the open box system pretty quickly and have kept it open ever since. Everyone takes what they want and nothing is written down." End of quote. Today, this system takes the form of a communal credit card account. The settlement's social and political life is based on voluntary acceptance of decisions by each individual member, with no coercion of any kind of statutory sanctions. The recognized behavioral limits ensuring social cohesion are arrived at collectively, and harmonious social life solely by people voluntarily abiding by the socially defined norms out of a sense of responsibility towards the community. While the kibbutz does have administrative officers, these have been reduced in number to an absolute minimum, with the few committees that exist at Samar doing so only on an informal ad hoc basis. Samar's system is not without its problems. For instance, as one member says, we can never be sure how many people are going to report for work on a given morning. Maybe 10 will show up on a day when only 2 are needed. Alternatively, only 3 may be available when there is a load of work to be done. Then I have to go and recruit people from other branches. If they agree to come, that's fine. But if they don't, there's nothing I can do about it. End of quote. Or as another very generic quote goes by one of my interlocutors, Samar does not work and has not worked for over 40 years. In my first fieldwork and master thesis on Samar, I have analyzed the notions of anarchism, cooperation, freedom, and hierarchy through the concepts of the age of total bureaucratization by anthropologist David Graeber and capitalist realism by Mark Fisher. Social theoretician Mark Fisher, and how those concepts play into the practice approach using Bourdieu and Desartaux of a way-seeking oriented paradigm, which I called orthopraxy, rather than a truth-seeking oriented paradigm, an orthodox paradigm. And further, how this practice approach is influenced historically and conceptually by anarchist ideologies. In lack of an empirical case study in Graeber's work, my research aimed to gather empirical support for his thesis on bureaucracy. I found Samar to be a community which deals constructively with the lack of imagination in regard to the ideologies of capitalist realism, i.e., the internalized logic that there is no alternative to social meritocratic organization bound to profit maximization, and total bureaucratization, the increased domination of standardized forms of authoritarian organization through formalized rules within liberal democratic systems. I might go into this later. I believe the case of Samar is of global relevance due to its resilience, success, and long-term stability. While intentional communities and smallholder farming are on the rise, most of them succumb, either due to failed internal government schemes or inability to cope with external pressures. Moreover, the COVID-19 pandemic has forced us to think more in depth about the update of social governance systems and rules, rethinking migration from the urban settings to the rural settings, and a growing intention to adopt low-carbon lifestyles among specific demographics. In this respect, the current internal social and global constellation is characterized by conflicting developments. This can be made even more dynamic by the pandemic, such as the unequal global access to vaccines. Scientifically refuted positions held by social majorities that the ecological challenge can be met through technological innovations and market instruments, despite the importance of redistribution policies or fundamental changes in everyday lifestyles, reveal systemic shortcomings in policymaking, consequently eroding public social trust and cohesion. Democratically organized intentional communities start becoming a serious option for individuals and governments as a response to the multiple crises. Even if alternative small-scale community life only represents variants of hope, learning and getting inspired by a successful community such as Samar becomes more relevant now than ever. To identify the potentials and the preconditions for successful struggles for a social ecological transformation, it is essential to identify the social, economic, and political cutting points of Samar's unique living and sharing approach. It is also imperative to look into its shortcomings and own internal conflicts. This involves the investigation of the perspectives of the generational differences, differing experiences between the genders, and the understanding who is being admitted and who selects to leave Samar and what they have to say about it. Building on alternative political strategies, my aim to pursue a PhD and make another more thorough study that seeks to explore how Samar's social and political structure relates and diverges from the long-lasting principles of capitalism and socialism, how the experience of Samar can provide alternative ways of organization, by examining what the prerequisites for its success and failure could be, and how those possible prerequisites can lead to social ecological transformations, and further, how contextual factors could be measured and upscaled onto other contexts. Yeah. So that was the title for my research proposal, Sustainable Without Trying. Is Samar a model community for social and economic sustainability? That is what I am keen to find out. Okay, so how are we on time? Yeah, we're good. Very good. I will jump over. We have the great pleasure that Sophie is here with us today.
Hi.
And I will make the switch and just interview you. So we have the other part.
Okay.
Okay.
Everybody hears me all right? Yeah. Okay. Great. Good to be here. Yay. And thank you, Merlin, for this presentation.
Thank you.
Of my home.
So how would you present yourself?
My name is Sophie. I am originally from Sweden. I met my husband, who is a Ben Kibbutz, or a son of the Kibbutz Samar in India 11 years ago. We moved to Samar 7 years ago and became members 4 years ago. And I'm also a proud mother of a child of 2.5. And yeah, at the moment we are living our lives in Samar and working in the dates plantations, both me and my husband.
For how long have you lived in Samar?
For 7 years.
7 years.
Yeah.
And what motivated you to move to Samar?
Well, first of all, my first encounter, and I want to go back to a little bit like what you spoke about, the education of the children. My first accounting with Samar was through my husband. I met him in India and I thought he was an absolute freak. I had never met such a person in my life before, and I was like, why are you so weird? And why aren't you traumatized like the rest of us? And why, you know, and he was just so full of kindness. Of course, it's also him, but I very much do believe that it's also the work of his parents and his work of his parents within the kibbutz structure and the safety that it brings and the joy that it brings to children. So that was my first encounter that motivated me to get to know Samar more. And also the decision I made to stay in Samar was actually in a Samar party. Everybody who just turned 60 had a big party together in the dining room. And there was a slideshow of pictures from when they were young and so forth. And when the DJ started playing, everybody started dancing, the children, the young people, the adults, the parents together. And into the dance floor, someone drives in the dessert on a big serving cart, like the size of this one. The cake was the size of that. And into that, just spoons stuck into the cake and everybody dancing and eating from the cake at the same time, kids and adults alike. And I felt this is a mindset I want to explore more. I like the way these people think. I was brought up in an upper middle class home in Sweden where everything was served on teeny tiny plates with a teeny tiny spoon and a teeny tiny cup, and everybody sitting having a very nice time. Not so nice time actually, but there it felt like these people know how to enjoy life, and I very much wanted to stay and understand what can I learn from this.
Okay. In your own words, how does Samar differ compared to other kibbutzim?
Well, I don't really have any life experience from any other kibbutz. All I know is a little bit what you spoke about in your presentation, that the older kibbutzim were very top-down ruled from committees and vadot and so on and so forth. A lot of the kibbutzim had a strong sense of authority. Often the first generation who came, they held the ideologies and they were the ones who have something to say and so on and so forth. Like very hierarchical and very controlled environment and the budgets and so on and so forth. But again, I haven't experienced that by myself. What I do feel that Samar is trying to achieve in their radical vision of what they're trying to free human potential as much as possible. They believe that instead of the individual working for the community is supposed to serve the individual's happiness. And I think that turning the pyramid upside down is one of the most radical things that Samar did with the vision of how they wish to live. So the people who are living in Samar experience like, hey, the community is supposed to be there for me, for my happiness, like a base for me to explore my human potential. And like it kind of turns it around that I'm not there for the community. Of course I am as well, because at the end of the day, there has to be a community for me to have as a base. So of course there's a dynamic relationship, but it's not a one-way relationship. Like we also have demands that the community should serve for mine and my family and my children's happiness. So I think that is the most radical difference.
Yeah. How do you take social and economic responsibility within the kibbutz?
Me person?
Yeah.
I don't know. Social.
I'm sure you do.
Well, it's interesting. It's interesting to be your own boss. I don't have a boss. There is no higher authority, like the kibbutz movement called it an anarchistic kibbutz, because of, again, how we radically wanted to be different from the authoritarian kibbutzim of the old days. So they very much wanted to create a structure, again, where the individual is the highest authority. So even though there is a general assembly, a sichat kibbutz, where we decide things, at the end of of the day, the individual is free to do as he likes. Will it face scrutiny from the other people? Yes. Will it go against the norms of what other people think? Yes. Will you have to find yourself being gossiped about? Yes. But at the end of the day, you can do as you like. You don't have a boss, and I don't have a boss in my workplace. I am free to get up in the morning and choose if I go to work or not. But at the end of the day, as we said, I have to take responsibility for that there is money in the kibbutz. I have to take responsibility that there is a kibbutz at all. So how free are you actually? Because at the end of the day, you have to provide for your life, yeah? But we do, most people do get up in the morning because we are motivated to continue to create the project that is Samar. So people, we get up, we take economic and social responsibility every day, even though we don't have to. There is no pressure that we need to do that, except for the pressure and the morale that we put on ourselves.
What differences do you experience since the beginning of your stay up until recently in the kibbutz?
Well, in the beginning of my stay, I was not a kibbutz member. The process takes about 2-3 years to become. And now, 3 years down the line, being a kibbutz member and I sit in the Vada, in the committee of accepting new members. And I get to face the underwaters of the kibbutz, things that as a newcomer or a volunteer, when you look at it, you go, wow, what a paradise. I get to face the inner darkness of the other people who live together with me, and my own inner darkness, of course, and that's never beautiful. So with that, of course, I have experienced, and at the moment, the light that exists above the surface in Samar is stronger than the darkness beneath it. So I feel that we're still at a good place. But one of the other big things that I've experienced is the technological revolution of the outside world has also come to Samar for better and good, especially when it comes to our voting system. We have a General Assembly that assembles every 2 weeks on Sunday evenings. And it used to be General Assembly where we all got together and we had somewhat healthy debates about the issues on the table. And nowadays, unfortunately, less and less people come because we started voting on our phones. And that doesn't demand that you were a part of the discussion about the topic before. So people can just sit at home and vote and not come to the discussion to the assembly. And for me, actually, I used to enjoy very much coming and listening to the wise words of some people and not so very wise words of some. But at the end, you would at least go out a little bit more enlightened, like see a perspective that you didn't manage to see before you got in. And that was very meaningful. And that today, unfortunately, we're losing more and more. Also, you can join on Zoom, but a blank screen or people put not just their picture there. It's not the same as a human interaction and a healthy debate. So we're facing that technological revolution that is positive, because also more people are participating over the phone and voting. So we're getting bigger voting rates, but at the same time, what quality of vote do we actually see because of the lack of healthy debate? So that's one of the things that I've seen changing.
Well, with that in mind, how do you experience social roles switching between friendship and partnership concerning contradictory interests that exist in the kibbutz?
Wow.
Tougher one.
That's a really
the...
tough one that I think anyone who lives in an eco village or a kibbutz can relate to. The fact that you meet some parents and you have your kids in the same kindergarten, and then you also work together and you actually also eat together and enjoy social cultural things together. And maybe you go to the gym and the yoga together and you also might be friends. All these roles in the outside world, when I lived in a big city, were usually divided between 5 people. Now it's the same person that I need to meet in all these roles. And yeah, it spills over, and you have to become very fluid in your persona to be able to integrate and hold the complexity of that. This person might be a great person to have my kid together with in the same kindergarten, but I don't want to do yoga with him. We might be able to, work very well, but I don't really want to sit with him at dinner. So you have to become a complex human being and integrate complexity into your persona. And that isn't easy and not always done with grace. But we tried. Yeah.
On the homepage of Samar, it is stated that the kibbutz follows an anarchist philosophy. How do you relate to this? So I'm not sure who put it up there, but
yeah. Well, anarchy in its core is about no rule, and I do believe that Samar still practices that. We don't have authority over the individual so far. It was actually really interesting just now lately. I sit in the membership committee, and we had some issues with new members wanting to come in, and some of the members came to us in the committee and they say, we have to stop the klita, we have to stop the new membership from happening, you have to stop it. And our response as a committee was, we don't have the power to stop it. It is not in our power as a committee to stop it. You as a community can vote for us to stop it, but we don't hold the authority to do that. So even though we have voluntary committees that get together, they actually don't hold any official power. They can't execute anything beyond what we decide as a community. So I think that also takes the pressure off the committees very much, that they don't have to implement anything that, that the community wants them to implement, or what they can't do anything what they wish to do so strongly. They need the the mandate, thank you, from the community. So the only thing that really holds significant power is the General Assembly, and the General Assembly again holds power, but also the individual is at the end of the day free to not follow. Our decisions are called recommendations. Yeah. So, yeah, I guess that makes us a very flat kind of pyramid, if not a pyramid at all. It's kind of flat line. And someone said everybody in Samar are kings and queens. And you can recognize your own kingdom, your own queendom, but you have to also recognize that the other person is a king or queen right next to you. And we share the same kingdom. Yeah, it's a very interesting social experiment.
What do you appreciate about Samar and what not?
Oh my God, how much time do you have?
10 minutes.
As I said in the beginning, what motivated me to actually explore Samar and live there for many years, it's because I see what this radical freedom, and when you give individuals everything, because we live in a very high quality of life. We have pools, we have great food, we have cars whenever you want, we have all the facilities really for a very content, materialistically content life. It fascinates me what it does to the individual that meets such a thing. I work with the volunteers as well, and some of them go into kind of a type of personal transformation when they come into such a place, yeah? And not only that, but I also see the kids, mainly the kids, what happens to them when they grow up in such an environment. And I think if we're thinking for a better world, about a better world and how we want to educate our youth, or what we want to give to our children, to have our children growing up in such a space, is one of the best gifts, I think, that Shalev's parents, my husband's parents, could give to him, and what that I can give to my daughter. But what I don't like about Samar, well, I'm not going to go into too many things here, but I think that the worst aspect of living in such a small community, or any community, is the gossip. absolutely despise this aspect of human character, that we do this to each other. I try to stay out of it as much as I can, personally, because I do not want to participate. But it really happens. And it's Samar, especially since we don't have any formal courts, like the streets kind of becomes the courtroom of your reputation. Yeah. So you don't know where the story is being told about what happened yesterday, and you don't know who's talking about you. You can't go and defend yourself. And so it kind of becomes this informal, very weird courtroom in the streets. And you know that the story is being deranged. And what that does to the human spirit, I can only say what it does to me. It makes me smaller. It makes me quiet. It makes me not want to participate. It makes me not feel safe to put myself out there with new ideas or speak my mind and so forth. And I think that is really shrinking people. And that's not just some people who do that. We all do that. Because it's a type of punishment, social punishment. When we don't have rules and courts and police, like we don't have anything that can actually give you a punishment or a ticket, we punish each other through blackening someone's reputation. And it's very ugly and it's very dark. And I think that's one of the worst aspects of living in any type of community. I think, I'm not sure if that's specific to Samar, but it definitely happens there. No.
Okay. How to put, I think, just jump to some of the questions. I've experienced that there is a demographic gap, that there are more and more older people who are retiring in Samar or working less in the advanced age, and not enough young people who are voted in. How do you balance this relationship? What is, so to say, in front of you? What will Samar develop into in the future?
Wow. Okay, so yeah, so definitely that is happening. We have a large group retiring very soon. Fortunately, these are people who love to work, and so they are going to continue to work. We see that with almost every elderly member that retires, that they continue to go to work as they like, very much more as they like than they did before. But we also have a big group in the community, unfortunately, that are looking towards privatization and division. So they are now opposing new membership because they believe that we're going towards a kibbutz that is going to split. So they don't want to split the cake with too many people. So they are working actively to hinder more members to come in. Yeah, so that's actually fresh. It's going on right now. Emails were passing just last week when I was here. Like any darkness, you just have to ignore it and push forward and bring more light. We just have to continue to bring more members and charm those people and say that the younger members, my age, we need to rise up and write a new vision for Samar, how we wish to live. We need to bring new businesses to Samar. We have to continue to push for the positive. And we're very strong as a community, actually, in the culture and music and party scene. So we do enjoy very much. We know how to live life, so to speak. So just to continue to strengthen those areas that is positive and just kind of a little bit take it seriously, but also kind of ignore that negative voices that has, want to take it to a direction that I don't wish to take it. Just bring new members, and the biggest problem is housing, that it's very expensive to build houses, and we don't have enough houses to bring more people, but these are just technical problems that we just need to solve. But yeah, we just need to continue to bring young people and find the right people who really believe in the values. So I think that at the end of the day will hopefully do it. That's why I'm in the membership committee, because I believe that that's the next step. That's what we need to focus on. No.
You seem very positive about it.
I'm just a positive person.
So maybe my last question, is Samar a freak coincidence or an idea worthwhile fighting for?
I guess both.
Both.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I don't think that the people who my husband's uncle was one of the first people who came to Samal. He was 18 at that time, and when I speak to him, and he loves to tell stories, yeah, he like. They didn't have a vision of what to create. So in a way, it is a freakish coincidence that all they knew was that they didn't want to be like what their parents did. It's kind of natural. We all kind of know what we don't want, but we don't know truly who we are, yeah? So they were very similar in that way. They didn't know what they wanted to do and create. They just knew what they didn't want. So in that way, it kind of became just this freakish coincidence. But I do believe, and that's why I wrote to this conference, that like, I believe that what Samar is and what you want to research, I think it's a story worth telling because of what it does to the individual. And I believe that the purpose for us is to be free and independent. And I think we flourish that way. And I think we're the most happy that way. And also if we're giving the resources to create that for ourselves, even the better. So in a way that is happening every day in Samal. And I believe that every individual story inside of Samal, because it is such an individualistic community, it's a story worth telling, what it does to you to live that way. So in that way, I do believe very strongly that, of course, it should be modified. I think what you said as well, that like only an intimate group of 10, 15 people can actually, maybe 20, keep such a trust that you can have an open bank account. We are now reaching kind of a limit of 100 and 111 members. And we're seeing that the old system that we used to have is starting to fall apart because you can't trust 100 people on an intimate, authentic, deep level. We all know that. How many friends do we actually have? I have 5 that I trust deeply. And my family, yeah? But like, and so 100 people, 111, where does it stop? Where does, so our own inner capabilities of trust put the limit to the system that we can actually have. So we're at a point of change, but I do believe that like, this way of living, this way of trusting each other, this way of cooperating, this way of building partnership that we have, this way of organizing without anyone being your boss, anyone telling you what to do, and you having to grow that inner authority for yourself. I believe that it's not only a materialistic journey, it's a type of spiritual journey that people go through when that happens, when you're placed in such an environment. And so for that, and for many reasons, it is definitely a story worth telling for future generations, yeah.
Okay, well, thank you very much. What an interesting presentation. So if you have any, our session is supposed to be over at 11, but the next session doesn't start till 11:30. So if you need to leave, you're welcome to, but I think there's lots of people who'd like to have some questions for Anton or Merlin or Sophie. So please feel free. I'll just hand you this. Lots of questions. I'll start here.
First of all, thank you both for the both lectures. Thank you, Sophie. It was very interesting morning. Anton, I have one question and one kindly comment to you. First, the question is how you deal with the multi-positions of the people. Well, in the morning, there are the teachers, there are the friends, the informal education. Okay, if you can say a word about this. And a short comment, we have an account between us because you didn't say where all the people learn the BEd education, which they use in the career. And for you both, it was really interesting, very interesting conversation. One comment and one question. The comment is that in fact, Samar exists 40 years. There are 100 members in it. There is a problem of the size of Samar, but there are no other Samars in Israel. And the system or the organization that did succeed somewhat more in this era or time is the new groups like Anton's one, which contains now more than 1,000 people, I think 1,500, Anton, all the new groups of the alumni of the youth movement. So it's raised a question. It raised a question. Beside that, it was very interesting complexity. But let's finish here.
It's hard to pin down numbers. I don't know, I heard Aaron at the back shouting numbers out. It's hard to pin down numbers exactly how many people are living this way in new models of kibbutz. What I can say is that they exist all over the country, in every town and city. There are groups living this way, living together and involved in projects that they have established in their surroundings. It's a growing phenomenon. Every year there are more and more groups. So that's in regard to that point. Yeah, Sophie also mentioned it in terms of the different roles that people have in the community. Again, I think a lot of questions could be asked, different questions, and the same answer that I would give is conversation. I think what's important is to put those things on the table. It's to be open about those things. But yeah, it creates situations, and I can give you an example. Each of the end of the school year, parents will have a conversation with their school classroom teacher about their child. So the classroom teacher for both of my kids are members of the kibbutz, and I meet them every day, and I see them all the time, and I have a good conversation. I eat meals with them, whatever it is. And for example, one of the questions is that all the parents meet the teacher in the school. We both live in the same building, and it's probably easier for both of us to meet in the evening or somewhere during somewhere in the building, and actually no, we need to try and somehow in some places create some form of separation. So, you know, we march down to the school, which is in the neighborhood, but still, you know, it's less than a kilometer away. But yeah, that's part of our lives. Part of our lives is that we are all building this life together, and we all have different responsibilities. And the same goes for decision making. And I think that what it demands is also a level of responsibility in the spheres that you are responsible for. I'm responsible for right now how we use our space in our building. And I'm making decisions in conversations with the team that I work with, but also with members of the kibbutz about how we use our space between the living spaces, the communal spaces, the kids' spaces, the outside spaces, and the offices, and how we divide up all that space. And I'm day to day making lots of decisions that affect everyone, because not every decision we come together as a community. In fact, no decisions we come together as a whole community. We don't do voting, we don't do any of that stuff. And there's an understanding also that I need to release personally, that I know that other people are making decisions. For example, the people that are responsible for the kids in our kibbutz. I did that for several years, and now I don't. And I know that those people are making decisions about that sphere of our lives. And I need to trust those people. I also need to be in conversation with those people when I have things to say. And I think what's also important is it's dynamic, that it's not the same people in those same positions all the time, and they're the same relationships, the same dynamic. I'm always coming from this point, they're always coming from this point, they're always coming to me as my kid's teacher, and I'm always coming to them as the parent of the kid that they're teaching, and that we also meet each other as partners, we meet together as people that we have lots and lots of other things to talk about, and not just my kid. That's the attempt anyway.
Okay, lots of other questions and comments.
Thank you both so much. To this one. Okay, hi. So I have a couple of questions about Samar. The first one, what do you do if there's a job that nobody wants to do? I mean, let's say in my kibbutz, we canceled the laundry because no one wanted to do the laundry. And if I'm in charge of the laundry and today I just I don't feel like working, so you don't have laundry, or even worse, if I'm the kindergarten teacher and I don't want to wake up, so you can bring your child to the kindergarten. How do you solve this situation without rules? And the other question, I think it's maybe the answer, is what's the place of peer pressure? Isn't peer pressure even worse than rules? I mean, if there is a rule, then I know that I'm supposed to be at work at 8 a.m. And if there's peer pressure, then I know that if I won't be at work at 8 a.m., everybody will talk about me, people will point at the dinner. And how do you manage these delicate moments?
Good question. Complex, yeah. But I would say that a norm is a type of rule. It's a type of social rule that we all come up with together that we haven't written down, but it's unspoken. And we all follow norms. Here in this conference and in the city and in Samar. We understand very well that, if I don't show up in the morning, people can't bring their kids, and that you don't want to be responsible for that. So I guess your own morale and your own norm system will put a stop or to any type of impulse that you might have that morning when you wake up and you don't feel like it. When it comes to jobs that nobody wishes to do, and again, of course, social pressure happens, and that's part everywhere. That's part of human life. That's not part of Samar life, I think. That's just part of human life. And yeah, sometimes rules, official rules are easier to follow because they're non-personal. When it becomes personal and you have to face these people, much harder, much less comfortable, but also easier to negotiate and easier to converse around and talk about. So it depends on who you are, how it will affect you. But when it comes to jobs that nobody wishes to do, I guess, first of all, we solve it with understanding that there is an opening, and we go around and we speak to people person by person. Like I see, like, okay, so there's nobody who's managing the kitchen at the moment. So I will go to someone that I'm like, I love your cooking. Why don't you do it? So that first goes around in the streets. And then if nothing happens with it, I guess the Maskirut will kind of send an email about it, going like this is an open position, please fill it. And if nobody wishes to do it, we will just order catering, and it will become a very expensive thing until someone picks up their shit and does it. So it always needs to face some kind of, it will just have to be created, or as an individual need or as a communal need, and someone will eventually pick it up, hopefully. No.
I was wondering the same thing. So such a good question. Other
Can
burning
I just say a word on that?
Okay,
Also
go ahead.
relate to that question too.
What's that? You don't want to use the mic?
So you can hear me, and you'll be the question to people on Zoom.
It's the Zoom issue, really, I think, for recording.
It's a religion problem.
Aaron,
problem.
I just want to comment on that question, and then I just want to say one thing on that question about peer pressure. Like maybe this will sound like doublespeak, and I know peer pressure exists, and it generally has negative connotations, and quite rightly. But there's also another way of looking at it. There's also another way of looking at it that there is a process of helping each other. There's a process of understanding that we can all lift each other up, and that we're not perfect. And there are things that we miss and forget, and we're weak, and we make mistakes, and we screw up. And sometimes it's a courageous act also to point that out to somebody. Clearly it's better when it's done one-on-one, face-to-face. And peer pressure is sort of this amorphous, faceless, gossiping in the street type of thing. But I think there are ways where we can strengthen our the way that we live according to our values by helping each other to see how we can do things better. Clearly, it's easy to do that with less people.
The point of conversation was solved in these groups, and didn't solve in the historical or traditional kibbutzim, and somehow face the real problem of all the kibbutz movement, I think, in all the kinds, the less of conversation, the disappear of conversation in the last generation. Sorry.
Was just to comment about what you said. So we do have data. No. Okay. So of course we do have some data about the movement that both me and Anton are the new national movement in Israel. It's about 250 communities, 50,000 people. So that's the scope of this movement. Not all of them are even sharing the end of it, but that's the movement. And it's growing. The question is, it's clear
Merlin, yes, yeah. No.
No.
So that makes it even more interesting, like in your perspective. Is there something particular in Samar? I don't know about it in Mishpot, with the 20 clients, but I think it's interesting to do with you as well. Is there something particular about the Jewish context, the Jewish heritage, the Israeli context, being out in the desert, reforms? The structure of somehow, its sustainability, its spirit, its life, or it might be one well happened in Amsterdam. Sorry, it's just a coincidence that it's in this place, this nation, this context.
Well, it can be. I wouldn't know for sure. There are many variables, but I would think from repeat the question.
Yeah.
How does Jewish life influence the context of Samar? Are you okay with that? Yeah. Well, what I've observed, the people live very heteronormative lifestyles. It's families, nuclear families, and it's nuclear families for themselves, but living together. And I think that the community builds on that, and that is very much part of Jewish culture and history. But other than that, my knowledge is not going further, unfortunately. Yeah. Well, or there was the other professor, Amnon Shapira, I think from Bar Ilan. He mentioned that that is maybe less connected. He has his thesis on anarchism being rooted within traditional Judaism from the ancient times, where also people would come together and live in small communities as the Kvutzot, and also in the same areas and living very religious, traditional lives. So there is surely a connection, I would think. Yeah.
I want to thank you both for your presentations and Sophie for sharing your experiences. I want to press a little further on this idea of mutual responsibility. Historically, anarchist communities fail because people don't take responsibility. Do you have mechanisms in place for expelling people if peer pressure is not enough?
No.
Okay. So what do you do if you have someone in your community that says, yeah, I'm not going to work. You guys support me.
Yeah, social death.
Yeah, okay. And related to that, and this applies, I guess, to Anton's community as well.
I want to just one thing.
Okay.
It is technically impossible in the kibbutz to have someone, how do you say, expelled? Yeah.
Okay.
You have to basically commit a really serious crime. People who have left by their own will. And so, yeah, basically it's impossible. We're starting to talk about a voluntarily exit. If you could actually start giving people a sum of money if they want to leave the kibbutz. It is problematic that people are having to stay in the kibbutz because they've given, what, 25 years of their lives now, and leaving would give them nothing. Here they have a house and everything, and on the outside they have nothing. So we're starting to talk about an exit route for people who wish no more to be a part.
So related to that, Anton's groups were all, I know it's everybody's under 50 basically. So
Just
where are
over
the
50,
older
the
people
oldest.
and how do you age, or what happens if you become disabled in a kibbutz situation? How do you manage that?
Okay, so in terms of the first question, again, a lot of my answers are about conversation. If there's somebody that is not working, it's usually because they're between work. It usually reflects on where they're at. It includes all sorts of other questions, issues, crises, personal, there's all sorts of things wrapped up in that. I don't believe that that it's about I can do this because I can, because there's nobody, also we have no rules and laws and no ways of ejecting somebody. The simple explanation is that person is lazy and actively trying to trying to manipulate or trying to trick us or trying to take advantage of us. Maybe there are examples of that, but I have experienced in the last 20 plus years that that people are not choosing to be in that situation over an extended period of time because they want to take advantage. It's usually caught up in a whole load of other things. And again, the place that I take it to is, we take it to, is about being in a conversation about what's going on and how we can support that person in what they're dealing with. And usually it is dealing with something or some things. And so that conversation is the important thing. And the other question was?
Dealing with people that are either
disabled, okay. Yes, we have started looking forward. Basically, we're on the cusp of, again, of getting old together. The oldest in our community are in their early 50s. And we are specifically a one-generational community. We're not expecting our kids to come and take over the farm. We're expecting our kids to spread, to go. Maybe they'll build their own version, maybe they won't. And basically, we'll end up as an old people's home and a socialist old people's home, but an old people's home where basically the last one will turn off the lights. And we're starting, firstly, we've put away pensions, money for pensions, which is small, but it's something that the old kibbutz, one of the things we learned from the old kibbutz is that expectation that the kids are going to come and take on the burden, financial work burden, was not as successful as they had hoped, and therefore a lot of kibbutz members were left with no pension and no money in their later years. So we're already for 10 years have been putting money aside to supplement the state pension. In terms of our building, we're going to be leaving our building, it looks like, at the end of our contract, our rental contract. Which in a lot of ways saddens us, but in a lot of ways we realize that the building is not at all suitable for getting old in it. The access is terrible, the spaces are narrow, it's just not, there's very small elevators to get to the 8th floor. All sorts of reasons why the physical space is not going to help us. But together we have, we were told that as soon as we couple up and there are families, then the kibbutz is going to die. We were told that as soon as we have kids, that the kibbutz is going to die. We're told that as soon as we change our living arrangements, which we've done several times as a kibbutz, we're going to end. And people can say that when you start getting older, you're not going to survive. So far, we've managed to deal with the challenges that life has thrown up at us together as a community. And I hope that we continue to do that going forward.
We should probably end on that note and just so that everyone can get ready for the next session. So thank you so much to our
Thank you.
presenters and audience. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
And I'm sure everyone will welcome